Okay, well, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today to the Centre for International Finance and Regulations FSI number 3 event. As I said, this is the third event that we've run in this series, and it's been a significant 2014, not just for the financial system inquiry, government, regulators, but also for our centre. Indeed, our centre was established, I think, in the main part for undertaking work to contribute to these kind of significant inquiries or reviews. And so, if I can just remind you, CIFR was established late 2011 out of the Labor government, and it was funded by both the Commonwealth and the New South Wales governments. It includes a consortium of 6 universities, 2 research centres and 4 industry partners. And CIFR to date has currently funded 64 research projects, and we've invested $6 million of our own funds, and that's been matched and has in-kind contributions. So our total funding of research, thanks to government and other participants, is $18 million. We've contributed to government inquiries and reviews on policy, including the FSI, portfolio disclosure, competition, boosting the commercial returns from research, to name a few. We've translated scholarly research into different mediums for different audiences, and have increased our media citations in ways that address critical issues that rely on the expertise of our research academics. CIFR also has enjoyed contributing to thought leadership in executive education courses and seminars for the benefit of Australia's cornerstone financial regulators, industry, government and associations. Indeed, 2015 should prove to be a watershed year as we build on the investments that we've made over the past 3 years in our research delivery, education and public policy contributions. The financial system inquiry has been a significant activity for Australian regulators, academics, industry and government over the past year or so. The review has proceeded with significant consultation, and this culminates in final submissions addressing the final report due by the end of this month. Today, our objective is to further contribute to this consultative process. This will be achieved through a diverse stakeholder group of participants who are assembled here today, as you can see from the program in front of you. I would also assert that constructive and valued debate on critical issues such as the financial system requires input from top scholars and quality scholarship that relate to issues of significance in the financial system. This indeed is an area of uniqueness that CIFR exhibits. The format of today is structured as follows. The morning session commences with an opening address from the Shadow Treasurer, the Hon Chris Bowen, Professor Kevin Davis, who is a member of the FSI panel, and also insights from CIFR's Chairman, Peter Mason. Next, we will move to the first of our concurrent sessions. These concurrent sessions address the 5 key chapters in the final report. You will notice that we have tax in there as the 6th element, and we've done that not necessarily to be cheeky, but tax is obviously an important theme in the final report, and indeed it's an upcoming issue that the current government is looking at addressing in the tax white paper. These concurrent sessions will be chaired by domain experts. The workshop also includes 2 panel sessions, and we're pleased that we can have Professor Justin O'Brien moderating both. We also have a number of experts who will be contributing their views, and these include Wayne Byers from APRA, Peter Kell-Asic, Kevin Davis again from the FSI panel, Karen Chester, Productivity Commission, Professor Graham Samuel from Monash University and formerly the ACCC Chairman, and Dean Sanders, the Professional Standards Council. An important thing to note about the Financial System Inquiry final report, indeed from my read of it, was that given the constraints placed on the FSI inquiry, including the tight terms of reference, The final report sought good public policy outcomes which led to them making 44 recommendations. Those recommendations are summarised in your information pack, so you can refer to them during the day. But the report also was able to outline a number of outstanding issues that the FSI decided to identify and leave to further research or analysis. I'll make two important observations here. First, good public policy development fundamentally must ensure that quality inputs and timeliness are invested in exploring all these issues, which is what the FSI have done by offering some caveats in their report. The second point I'd like to say is that to the extent that CIFR and other like-minded organisations and individuals and companies could contribute to continuing exploration of these issues is really critically important. And so today is really about trying to provide an additional insights, feedback that we can include in a submission to the FSI final report, such that Treasury and Government can be best informed with what's in front of them. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. In the interest of time, I will not read out all the full biographies of everyone listed, but in the case of the Honourable Chris Bowen, he is no doubt the Shadow Treasurer and also the Federal Member for McMahon. He's had a very meteoric rise. He's relatively young and has achieved a lot in a short space of time. He was first elected to Parliament as the Member for Prospect in October 2004. He holds a Bachelor of Economics degree from the University of Sydney. He's had a number of roles in his life. He first was elected to Fairfield Council in 1995. He assumed or was elected the Mayor of Fairfield from 1998 and 1999. He served as the Chief of Staff to the Honourable Carl Scully in the New South Wales portfolio of roads, housing, and also he was the Leader of the House there. Chris has had a number of other portfolios in Federal Parliament. He was first elevated to Cabinet as the Minister for Human Services in June 2009 and also served as the Minister for Financial Services, Superannuation and Corporate Law. Following re-election in 2010, Chris was appointed Minister for Immigration and Citizenship. He's also been previously appointed Minister for Tertiary Education, Skills, Science and Research and Minister for Small Business. Chris was appointed Treasurer by Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and he currently serves as the Shadow Treasurer. It's my great pleasure to welcome the Honourable Chris Bowen.
Thanks, David, and thanks for the invitation to be here today. It's not every day that you get to address a body that you helped establish in government, working on such matters as the implementation of the Johnson Review into Australia's Financial Services Hub was something I very much enjoyed doing as Assistant Treasurer and then as Minister for Financial Services, and an agenda I would very much looking forward to returning to as Treasurer. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. The Murray Report is, of course, the latest in a long line of inquiries into the financial sector in Australia. They've all been influential in their own way. The Royal Commission into Banking in the 1930s, which included Ben Chifley as a member, was important in informing the approach to financial regulation of the Curtin Labor government, in which Chifley served as Treasurer. The Campbell and Martin inquiries both set the framework for financial deregulation, which was one of the hallmarks, of course, of Paul Keating's tenure as Treasurer and played a vital role in setting up Australia's so far uninterrupted 24 years of economic growth. And the Wallace inquiry set the course for the eminently sensible streamlining and consolidation of prudential regulation, which occurred with Peter Costello as Treasurer. Today I want to give you a flavour of Labor's approach to the thrust of the Murray inquiry. The government is yet to formally respond to the Murray inquiry, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that the government's released the report to allow feedback from the sector before finalising its response. This is appropriate, and I welcome it. The issues do need to be percolated and considered before the government reaches a final conclusion, and I congratulate the Treasurer for taking this approach. We regard the Murray Report as a serious one. The report is generally well considered, and its recommendations should be given due regard. This doesn't mean, of course, that I or the Labor Party will necessarily agree with every single recommendation, but it does mean that we take the report as a serious body of work, and we respect the work that's gone into developing the recommendations. As far as possible, issues in relation to prudential and financial regulation should not be a political football. It's important for confidence in our financial system that there's a degree of bipartisanship when it comes to prudential regulation. The sector and consumers deserve to know that a change of government does not necessarily mean a wholesale change of direction on prudential and financial regulation. This does not mean that the opposition needs to write the government a blank cheque or blindly agree with every proposal, but it does mean that there should be a genuine attempt at bipartisanship. When it comes to prudential regulation, in those elements of the Murray Report, the Treasurer and I have compared notes, and we agree on the fundamentals. It's important that this area of economic policy be one where the government and the opposition can engage in a constructive way and concentrate on what unites us, rather than those issues on which we have a different perspective. So in the time that I have available today, I'm not going to comment on every recommendation or observation in the Murray Report, but I do want to provide you with some views on the key recommendations, or at least some of them. Firstly, if briefly, let me deal with the issue of banking competition. We want to see a banking system in which larger and smaller banks engage in strong rivalry with each other on a competitively neutral footing. This is in the best interest of consumers. Recommendation 2 of the inquiry seeks to foster a more competitive banking system through putting big and smaller financial institutions on a more level playing field when it comes to capital requirements. This is a recommendation that I find sensible and positive. Such a change would allow smaller ADIs to focus on the task of providing competitive offerings rather than meeting the requirements more onerous than their larger cousins. Now, whether this objective is best met by changing the requirement on big banks or small, or some combination of both, so that they meet in the middle, is a judgment best left to APRA. But the objective laid out in recommendation 2 is a good one. I know that there's an intersection here with the discussion paper issued out of Bale in December. And while it's important that local and international regulatory changes be coordinated, it would be a pity to see these pro-competitive domestic changes delayed while the Bale process makes its inevitably slow way through the system. If the government and APRA chose to move on recommendation 2 in advance of the Bale process, they would do so with our bipartisan support. The inquiry also recommends that a clear objective for the superannuation system be established. I found this recommendation arresting in its simplicity. Many people would think that superannuation already has an agreed objective, but actually it doesn't. Or perhaps the problem is that everybody's got their own. I sometimes joke that in 10 years in Parliament and 6 years as a minister, I've never heard of one public policy problem which doesn't have one of 2 solutions suggested for it. Teach it in the curriculum or get superannuation to invest in it. That fixes everything. It's natural enough when we have an asset like superannuation, which is now worth more than our annual GDP, that plenty of people want to use it for one purpose or another. It's great if superannuation funds can invest more in infrastructure, for example, but it's not the purpose of superannuation. Likewise, having more funds under management through superannuation has reduced the cost of capital in Australia and helped us during the GFC. It's a good thing, but it's a bonus. None of these things can or should be the objective of superannuation. Having an agreed and simple objective would mean that progress could be measured against that objective. It would also mean that new policy ideas could be tested against the criteria of whether they meet that objective. So I'm in favour of an agreed objective for the superannuation system, and I'm more than happy to invest the time and effort to see if we can make that objective bipartisan. Here's an opening suggestion. Our superannuation system should ensure that as many Australians as possible have access to the resources for a dignified retirement without recourse to the full age pension. We can discuss the issues of adequacy and definitions around that objective, but it's a good starting point in my view. Before I move on, let me underline another reason why I think a simple, agreed objective would be a good thing. Now, some of you may be thinking this speech is overly bipartisan and warm and cuddly. Let me disabuse you for a second. I think the Treasurer's thought bubble this week about allowing access to superannuation for housing deposits and retraining was disastrous. It would achieve a rare double of worsening housing affordability while undermining retirement incomes all at the same time. It would allow first homeowners or buyers to bid against each other at auctions with their retirement incomes. The only winners would be vendors, and it would see housing prices rise even further, all the while eating away at retirement incomes when we should be increasing them. Not only did the Murray inquiry not recommend such a ridiculous idea, but it specifically confirmed that superannuation should be used exclusively for income in retirement. So I'm disappointed that such a recommendation will be undermined before the government has even formally responded to the Murray inquiry. But my point is, if there was an agreed objective for superannuation, ideas such as this could be assessed against that objective, and in this case, in my view, found wanting. Housing affordability is a real issue. Australians are rightly worried as to whether their kids will be able to afford to crack into the housing market. This is something Bill Shorten and I have discussed at some length. And he's asked myself and our Shadow Housing Minister, Jan McLucas, to focus on coming up with practical suggestions for improvement. We've been consulting widely and will continue to do so. But this thought bubble of allowing access to superannuation for housing deposits has been rightly rejected by many. Having an agreed objective for superannuation can only mean that these sorts of debates are held in an improved context. The Murray inquiry makes a valuable contribution to the debate about equity in the taxation treatment of superannuation. It points out that well over 30% of the value of tax concessions in superannuation accrue to the top decile of income earners. This is a problem for several reasons. It's not only unfair, but if we agree that the objective of the superannuation system is at least in part to take pressure off the age pension, it makes very little sense to provide most of our tax concessions to people who are never likely to darken the door of a Centrelink office. Of course, we in office put in place some measures to improve the equity and efficiency of the tax treatment of superannuation. We introduced the low-income earners superannuation contribution so that people under $37,000 a year effectively paid no tax on their superannuation, as well as modest measures at the upper end of the income spectrum. Both of these initiatives have been reversed by the current government. New modelling, which we're releasing today, shows that this decision, combined with the decision to freeze the rate of compulsory contributions, the superannuation guarantee, will leave Australians with $983 billion less in their retirement incomes by 2055. It means more Australians will be reliant on the age pension in retirement. Pressures on the federal budget, of course, make this discussion around superannuation even more pressing. Labor does believe that the tax treatment of superannuation needs improving. Again, we've been consulting with the sector about options. It's important that consultation continues because this is an area riven with complexities and unintended consequences can be easy to come by. In coming weeks, we'll be convening a roundtable of superannuation groups and others to inform the consultations further, those consultations that we've been undertaking on a one-to-one basis up to this point. We'll take a balanced and fair policy to the election. We'll seek a mandate for the sorts of changes that I'm talking about. And we'll implement that mandate should we win the election. And then, in my view, it's important we allow a period of stability so that people don't fear that superannuation is open to annual changes. I've not changed my view that we need to see superannuation policy through a longer-term prism than the annual budgetary cycle. Bill Shorten, Bernie Ripoll and I remain strong supporters of the concept of a Council of Superannuation Guardians to advise governments on potential changes to superannuation policy on a 5-year policy cycle, ideally linked to the release of the intergenerational report. So our approach is clear. Consult and further develop our policy on superannuation tax policy, seek and hopefully win a mandate to implement it, then implement it, and then ensure a period of policy stability which would see superannuation taken out of the annual round of speculation about what might be in or out of the federal budget. Fairness, budget sustainability and long-term demographic change all argue for a serious national discussion about our superannuation tax concessions. This is a discussion that we in the Labor Party intend to lead. So there's a flavour of a response to just some of the recommendations in the Murray report. I've not given an exhaustive or complete opposition response. In the time that I've been allocated, it wouldn't be possible to do so, but I've attempted to give you a flavour of Labor's approach. I also, for example, welcome the report's emphasis on, and I quote, the fair treatment of users. I agree with the report's powerful comment that fair treatment occurs where participants act with integrity, honesty, transparency and non-discrimination. A market economy operates more effectively where participants enter into transactions with confidence that they'll be treated fairly. This was, of course, the philosophy underpinning Labor's future financial advice reforms, which we have successfully defended in the Senate. It's good to see that the inquiry thinks that fair treatment is crucial to an efficient and stable financial system. We certainly agree. The financial system has served Australia well over the last 40 years. Improvements to regulation introduced by governments of both persuasions have meant that we have a system that stands up to scrutiny and to shocks. It's from this sound starting point that the Murray report enters the public debate. It's important to have a discussion in which people of goodwill can contribute thoughtfully and purposefully. And your forum today is an important opportunity for many people to do that. Australia's financial system and our economy will be better off as a result of such a thoughtful discussion as stimulated by the Murray inquiry. Thanks for your time this morning.
We have some time for questions, a couple of questions. I might just ask the first one, if I can, Chris Bowen. In terms of the terms of reference, does the opposition feel that they were exhaustive enough, or was there anything that the terms of reference missed that should have been addressed?
I think the terms of reference were pretty broad and appropriately so. And knowing David Murray a little bit, I doubt that he would have been too constrained. If he felt that there was something he should have looked at, I think he would have looked at it.
Thanks, Chris. One of the areas of the financial system inquiry report was in relation to opening up income stream products, and that whole, let's turn it into a system that does provide income streams and choice in that. In terms of your position on that, do you see another area where there could be bipartisan support?
Yes. My position on income streams is that if there are barriers to them being offered in a more comprehensive and attractive way, then we should look at that. Jeremy Cooper, who's in the room, who conducted a very fine inquiry on behalf of the previous government, considered some of these matters. I don't support, I know some people call for annuities to be made compulsory. I don't support that. My view is if annuities are attractive to people, then they'll take them out. And we should trust people to make those sorts of decisions. And if you look at an annuity and say, well, it's not for me, it's probably because the product's not good enough. And so there's an obligation on providers to ensure their product is attractive, and also there's an obligation on governments to look at, well, if attractive products aren't being offered, is there something the government's doing which is getting in the way of that? Is there some regulatory reason for that, or some treatment in the tax system? I don't think, to be clear, that, I don't agree with the comments of some that superannuation is being abused on a wide basis, people retiring, spending all the money and then going on the age pension. People are smart enough to know that that is not a sound strategy. People, as everybody understands, we're living longer, you've got to make your money last, and I have not seen any evidence to support the view that people are going on a cruise and then coming back and going on the age pension. Might be remarkable that that doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen anywhere near as much as some people might suggest. So for that reason, I don't support compulsory annuities, but I would be happy to engage on that recommendation because they do have an important role to play in the system as a part of choice. Sure.
There was a comment in the Murray review around tax, in particular around imputation. Do you have a policy view on that?
Well, I think think I'm right in saying it was an observation rather than a recommendation. Look, the imputation system has served Australia very well. It was introduced we were one of the first countries to introduce it. I understand the arguments about you could get rid of imputation and have a dramatic reduction in the corporate tax rate. I understand that point. But that would be, obviously there would be, as well, there would be people, particularly through superannuation funds, who would stand to lose from that, as foreign investors would win. So that would be a win-lose decision for a government to make. It would not be a win-win decision. And for that reason, all governments, I think, have shown caution in thinking about that, and that would continue, I would suspect, under governments of both persuasions. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much, Charles Sanford, Griffith University. I thoroughly agree with your comments about the use of superannuation for housing. I think that's quite true. Although there is another issue in that young people at a time when probably the most rational thing for them to do is to accumulate capital for a deposit, are actually forced to actually accumulate capital for retirement. And that is a question Brian Toohey and others have raised that as to the compulsory elements of it. You're actually preventing people from being able to make what may be a better investment for them. The other thing I wanted to ask about, when you say that if superannuation should only have one goal, I'm not 100% sure about that. If in fact there's going to be a massive compulsory transfer of a lot of assets into particular form, I'm not sure that it's unreasonable to ask that might do more than one thing. It might be about Australians having greater investment in their own assets and companies and so forth. And whilst not suggesting that we go back to the old 30-20 rule, the idea that superannuation tax benefits might require more than one goal is, I'm not sure, entirely inappropriate. When you're putting a huge investment into something, sometimes you might say, I want to do two things rather than one.
Sure, thanks. On the first issue, I like Brian Toohey, but he hates superannuation. And he would abolish it tomorrow if he could. So I don't think we should get too caught up in his views that, there should be changes to superannuation. He just doesn't support the system. Fair enough, it's a democracy, but I disagree. On the second point, I understand your point, but I think it's very hard when you start loading in more objectives. You will very quickly find them in conflict with one another, potentially. So I think it's simplest and best just to have one, in full recognition that there can then be, as I said, bonuses and byproducts out of the superannuation system. And for example, if you said an objective of the superannuation system is to encourage more investment in infrastructure, well, that might conflict with the objective to maximise retirement incomes. It might not, or it might. In some instances, much better, in my view, to say the goal is to give as many Australians as possible a dignified retirement, and then along the way, if it can have other positive byproducts, then that's a good thing. And I referred to two, infrastructure and lowering the cost of capital, both of which already happen, both of which are fantastic, particularly during the GFC. It was particularly useful, but it was not why the system was set up. It's a byproduct and a bonus, which we should be grateful for, but I don't think it's fair on the superannuation system. Again, I said it jokingly, but I mean it. I mean, the number of ideas I've heard of people through my door saying, got this great idea for the superannuation system. You can get it to do this, you can get it to do that, you can invest in this, you can make it do that. It's not what it's for. And if you can pitch to trustees and boards an idea which makes sense in terms of maximising retirement income and having other benefits along the way, then great, I'm all for that. But it's got to achieve that objective. If it doesn't, then you're undermining what it's meant for. And it's more important than ever. When we talk about the intergenerational report and long-term pressures, superannuation is more important than when it was first established. And so that objective of giving people those resources, and I use the term resources rather than income because it is about resources these days. There's resources to call upon in terms of a health crisis as you get older, or some sort of other crisis in your life, which is not necessarily recurrent income. So there is that tension there. But the short answer is, I don't think, on balance, that you can have more than one objective without them at least having the potential to be in conflict. Great.